Hello Facebook, hello YouTube. What is up everybody? This is Ruben and I am finally back with another Ruben report. Today's video is going to be my long-awaited, long-term 6,000 mile review video that I was promising to release about my 2021 model CSC RX3. You're probably looking at it and probably have gone on websites potentially. If you're someone who's new, who has not been following along thus far, you're probably looking at my bike and thinking to yourself, why does it look like that? Why is don't worry, I on purpose have removed all the different fairings and certain things off of the bike due to experiments and a lot of other things that we're going to talk about in this video. So before we get started, I want to show you guys the mileage, and then we'll speak about a couple things. Okay, so as usual, here we are. So we are at 5,906.3. So not quite 6,000 miles just yet. And if you've been following along, the last time that I posted, which was about 2 weeks ago or so, I think I was at 5,770 miles. Oh, one moment. All right, I went back to check the video, and it was indeed about 5,770 miles. So I've put 130 miles or so on the bike since my last video, which was about 2 weeks ago. All right, but in typical Ruben Reports fashion, I have a little bit of maintenance that I wanted to get done on the bike. So I'm going to be cleaning the chain and looking a couple things over, giving the bike a wash down, the typical things that I usually do, and then we'll get into some of the discussion topics. Okay. All right, y'all, I just got done giving the bike a complete wipe down. Just check fluids and check certain cables, all that jazz. Check coolant level, tire pressure. Okay, gave the bike a wash down. As you can see, everything is clean. And then we have the chain that I'm gonna wipe down in just a moment. Still hasn't sat for long enough. All right, just wipe down the chain, so everything's good, ready to go for, well, we'll see how many miles we can go. Okay, so just like all the rest of my other reviews that I've done in the past, I'm going to be doing a short intro. If you're someone who is unfamiliar with Ruben Reports, I'd like for you to know what my whole channel has been about, who I am, what kind of rider I am, what it is that I've been using this bike for, just so you can get a better understanding of, in particular, what my expectations have been for this bike, so that way you can get a better understanding of what viewpoint I'm coming from with my judgment or with my critique about certain things. Okay, so we're going to get into that first, and then we'll come back to talk about or to start things off with my review video.
All right, guys, so in this section we're just going to be doing a little intro about myself, my background, how long I've been riding motorcycles, why I've been riding motorcycles, and just a little bit about my whole expectations and what it is that I'm trying to achieve by riding motorcycles. And I know for many of you who have never encountered my YouTube channel, this could be very useful information for you. But if you guys, I know that I've done this intro or did different iterations of this intro multiple times in other videos before, whether it was the CSC, should you buy a CSC motorcycle, save money on gas, or even my previous 3,000 mile review video. I just don't know who's going to be watching or who's looking. So if you're someone who you're not new, you've already been following along, you can just go ahead and skip this part and get straight to the review portion. But for you guys who are new, who've never encountered my channel before, this will just give you a better understanding of what I'm all about, and yeah, a little bit about my background. So to start things off, I have been riding motorcycles for about 11 months now. I started back in September of 2021. The whole reason why it is that I decided to start to learn how to ride motorcycles was because I live in California, and in the past year or two, if you haven't earlier, you probably have seen in my driveway there that I have a pickup truck. That pickup truck has been my daily driver for the past 5 years now. I've had it for over 5 years, a little over 5 years now, and it was basically my daily driver, ride or die vehicle. It's obviously very inefficient, doesn't get the best gas mileage, and in the past 2 years or so, here in California, we have seen the highest spike and rise in gas prices that I've ever experienced. And so about almost a year ago now, I was really looking into alternative methods of transportation, and a lot of those methods of transportation included like maybe riding a bicycle, electrical bikes, electrical scooters, possibly even gas powered scooters, anything that would allow me to get to and from where I needed to go, but very economically. And ultimately, I came to the conclusion that riding a motorcycle would possibly be probably the most effective and efficient method of alternative transportation. And as I was going down that rabbit hole of researching different bikes and seeing what would accommodate and fit someone of my stature, I am 6'5", a little bit over 300 pounds. The weight's been going down recently, but at the time when I was looking for bikes, definitely for someone who is as big as I am, I got a lot of different advice out there, especially for someone who is starting as a brand new rider. You typically get the advice or the recommendations. Hey, the Rebel 300 is a great starter bike, and Ninja 400 is a great starter bike, things of that nature. And again, for someone who is 6'5", those bikes are just way too small. And I was searching, and I came to the conclusion that a lot of these either dual sport or adventure style motorcycles typically accommodate tall riders like myself the best. And so I started doing more research on it. I saw online, especially on YouTube, seeing the multiple different videos about the Hawk 250 and a lot of its different cousins. But me being in California, anytime that I tried to order one of those motorcycles, I was met with the cannot be shipped to California error on the Amazon screen. So that left me with the CSC TT250, which buying that bike brand new at the time was a little over $3,500 or $3,700 shipped to my door here in California, that is, again. So I decided to skip on that. We didn't want to invest so much money into a motorcycle, especially not really knowing whether or not I was gonna really be dedicated to this. But sure enough, I was lucky enough to find one on the marketplace or on Craigslist. So I bought my first motorcycle was the TT250, bought it used, and I kept that bike for about 2.5 months. It did its job. I did not keep it for very long. I rode it for about 130 miles, learned all the basics, and once I got all the basics, I was quickly looking for something that was going to be a bit more capable and a bit more useful for my needs. I wanted something that could potentially do highway if needed, still got really good gas mileage, something that was about 60 miles to the gallon or more, potentially, and something not too expensive. And I would also rather buy something brand new instead of buying something used, because again, being a newer rider, didn't know too much about motorcycles. But my experience with the TT250 was great. Even though I didn't ride it very much, it was great. It was very easy to work on, and that kind of turned me on to, or brought me on to the family of CSC motorcycles, having a good experience with the TT250. And so I continued to look within the family of the CSC motorcycles, and I was pretty much struggling between the RX3 and RX4. Now, there is a video that I have made that is titled, "Should You Buy a CSC Motorcycle to Save Money on Gas?" And that is a video that I'm going to be putting at the end of this video. It's a very great video. It's very in-depth and in detail, goes into explicit detail of all the different factors that I went over and considered while I was deciding to buy a motorcycle. All right, so if you want more information on that, that is a video that I highly suggest that you watch. It is very informative. But ultimately, I ended up with the CSC RX3 that I have today. And yeah, my goal with this motorcycle was to pretty much replace my pickup truck to be used as my main method of transportation, so that way I can save money on gas. And at the time, my commute wasn't too far, but ultimately I ended up switching job positions, and the very footage that you see in the background now was pretty much what the bike was, or what I was using the bike every single day to commute at. I'm commuting at about 55 miles an hour GPS for 60 miles a day, 30 miles each way, along with doing some inner city type riding, going to the grocery store, you name it. And if you, again, I encourage you to watch that video, "Should You Buy a CSC Motorcycle to Save Money on Gas?" Because in that video, again, I go in explicit detail on all kinds of metrics about how many miles I was expecting. So I was actually expecting to be riding well over 14,000 miles a year, actually over 15,000 miles a year. So I was really anticipating to put some serious miles on whichever motorcycle I was looking at buying. So that's what I mean when I say I wanted a commuter bike. I wanted something that was capable and reliable to be able to be a substitute for my pickup truck. And yeah, so and about Reuben reports, the reason why Reuben reports exists. While I was searching out there in the internet for information on this particular motorcycle, there's really not much. You can find information within forums. You can find it possibly even within like Facebook groups, blog posts, but I couldn't really find any information from someone who was like myself, someone who is a newer rider, someone who was using it specifically and strictly for commuting, and also just the day-to-day realities of what it's like to own this bike. The majority of the information you find out there is going to be videos that are either in foreign languages and or just folks having fun on their bike. But that doesn't really give you that doesn't really give you kind of the inside ins and outs of what it's truly like to own this bike. You know what I mean? And so that's why I decided to make this channel, so that folks can have a realistic view of what it's like to own this bike, the issues, how to maintain it, how to do certain upgrades, the kind of quirks and and things to deal with, things to look out for. I mean, you name it. For basically any other motorcycle out there that you can think of, there's content and folks who make videos and information to be found. And with this bike, it's just not the case. So that's why this channel exists, and that's why I decided to take it upon myself to make videos and to put the information out there to share my experience, so that I can help others either to maintain their own bikes if they have them, or just give other folks out there who are prospective buyers or newer riders who are looking to potentially buy this motorcycle. It just gives them a better insight of what it's really like to own it, so they can have a more informed opinion and be able to make an informed decision on whether or not this particular bike would suit their needs. In short, I pretty much just wanted to make the exact same content that I wish I had when I was searching and researching about this motorcycle, for others out there who are looking to do the same. So anything that I can think of that I thought would have been useful information, I've done my best to document my whole experience, so folks can have, again, an in-depth, realistic insight on what it's like to own this motorcycle day in and day out.
Okay, welcome back. And now that you guys have a better understanding about who I am as a rider, what I've been using this bike for, we're going to start this review off with things that I actually appreciate about this bike thus far. And after riding this bike for 6,000 miles, almost 6,000 miles that is, the number one thing I appreciate about this bike is undoubtedly the center stand. Okay, every single maintenance video that I have ever done on this bike, and there has been many, the bike has been in this exact spot, or either in my garage sitting on the center stand, making maintenance that much easier. Not having to have a lift or any type of specialty tools to be able to get certain work done has been quite easy. I mean, obviously, I've been owning this bike up to this point now for about 7 months. Yeah, about 7 months now. And I've been definitely putting a lot of miles on this bike, as much as I could in that short time span. So definitely going through, doing a lot of chain cleanings, doing more frequent oil changes, things of that nature. The center stand has been a key player, along with some other upgrades that I want to mention as well, that have been instrumental in making maintenance much easier. Second thing I appreciate, going along together with the center stand, talking about maintenance again, is the quick release drain plug. Okay, that is an upgrade that you can buy for this bike. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for those who don't necessarily plan to put a whole lot of miles on the bike. Overall, within this review, I don't really recommend you put a whole bunch of miles on this bike at all, but we're talking about that later. But just in general, doing oil changes with that quick release drain plug has made things a lot more efficient, a lot easier as well. So it's also a big thumbs up for that particular upgrade. Another thing that I like, which is not really an upgrade, it's just how the bike comes. At least before I took everything apart, it came with a lot of luggage. You had, I can post up a picture here or a little short video clip here of how the bike used to look in a moment.
Here's a little snippet from an older video. This is a video from my UET, or Ultimate Endurance Test Series. Just as usual, the bike is parked in the exact same spot using the center stand as I explained before, but as you can see, the bike has all the crash guards, has the boxes on there, and the chain guard, and a lot of other different things that are just plain missing at the moment. And the reason why they're missing at the moment was because there's a lot of other different series that I've gone through, such as the WG weight reduction experiment and the stock gearing experiment. These are things that we're going to talk about a little bit later once we get into the other section of the video. But yeah, there's tons of videos that you guys can look at. Again, my ownership experience has been documented completely within this YouTube channel. So if there's anything that you're pretty much interested about, like how was the bike maintained, how was the bike ridden, what upgrades you've done, you can find everything here on this channel. Okay.
So yeah, how the bike used to look, it has side panniers and comes with a top box, and it has had a crash guard. So it was literally completely set up for whatever application you want to use it for. It's perfect for someone who wants to take it on a little adventure, going off-road for the first time, or even just possibly even a first-time motorcycle owner. You would be, intimidated of dropping your motorcycle potentially. You got crash guards there to protect it. Obviously I don't have it on there now, which we'll talk about later. But that was another thing that I really appreciated about the bike. It made going to the grocery store, doing grocery runs, just carrying things around a whole lot easier. I use this bike as a commuter bike, and it's really has been used, truthfully has been used as a full replacement for my pickup truck. So when I was riding it very frequently, and when I was riding it almost every day, I was using it to do everything. Go to work, go to the grocery store, all of it. And so having had that extra luggage space to hold maybe another jacket, my work gear, my laptop, all that stuff, and then after work being able to stop by the grocery store to grab a couple things, it was great to have. And as you guys can see, I've downsized. This is not the box that it comes with, but this is the box that I have now. I've kind of simplified the whole setup, and I haven't put anything back on just yet. But that box is pretty much all I need now. I might put the other boxes back on, but that's pretty much all I need right now. Fits my helmet, fits other things, all my other little stuff in there as well. So that's also another thing that I really appreciate about this bike. The next thing that I really appreciate would be it's, how I want to say, it's very customizable. So I am 6'5", and so for someone who is my size, I was really glad that I was able to purchase a tall seat for this bike. So being 6'5" and raising the seat height up to 34 inches, that made the ergonomics and being able to ride the bike a lot more comfortable for someone of my height. So this bike is comfortable and can be configured in such a way to accommodate all different kinds of riders. So if you're someone who is as short as like what, 5'2", you can get a lowering link to raise it down. And for someone who is as big as me, 6'5", you can get a tall seat and it can fit you as well. So this can fit all kinds of people and be able to suit your needs so you can be comfortable on the bike. Next would be, I don't know if I've mentioned this already, but the stator. The stator that comes with this motorcycle, I think it's a 300 watt stator, if I'm not mistaken. I believe so. And that allows you to add a lot of different accessories to the bike, obviously. So I've put, again, I use that as a commuter bike, so I've put a lot of different upgrades on here and little accessories to make it a little bit more comfortable for commuting and a lot more useful for commuting. So I got these big wind guards. They're not really hand guards because they don't have the metal support inside, but they protect my hand from wind. I have heated hand grips, so that allows me to draw power from the system and not overload it as much, and not overload it because of the high output stator. We have some auxiliary lights up front here, so that really helps out with riding at night. I made a video on that not too long ago, and there's also a lot of different commuting videos of me riding at night as well. Other videos that you can check out. Okay. Oh, and the extended wind screen that I have on top there, because again, I'm a pretty tall guy. Okay. That so far is pretty much it as far as upgrades. I will say as well, easy to work on. It's also something I appreciate, the way that the bike is designed to be easily worked on with simple hand tools. I am not a professional mechanic, but this bike truly has helped me learn as someone who is new to motorcycles, you know, how to understand how certain systems work and how certain how the whole ins and outs of a motorcycle, basically, what it's like. And basically it's allowed me to gain the confidence to roll my own sleeves up and to tinker around with stuff, you know, to dig in there and to work on things, solve my own solve problems, and to troubleshoot things. I am a IT professional as my career, so it's basically my job to solve problems and troubleshoot things. So tinkering around with this bike was definitely something that allowed me to use that type of skill set. And again, it's not too complicated, not too daunting for someone who is newer to motorcycles. And lastly, but not least, obviously the community. There is an amazing community behind this bike, and a lot of others that are like it, whether it be the China Rider forums, the CSC Facebook page, that I have description in the links to in the description below. You can go in there, talk to some pretty amazing folks that give all kinds of advice on their experience when it comes to this particular bike and many other bikes within the CSC family. So it has been a great experience being in the Facebook groups with them and just being able to share my experience thus far. And yeah, also goes hand in hand with CSC, the company, as well. They're also very supportive and very helpful at wanting to support their customers with whatever issues that they may have. So those are definitely all the things that I'm very appreciative about when it comes to the CSC RX3. Okay, so now within this part of the video, I'm going to talk about some of the issues that I've been experiencing up to this point. And to be honest with you, it's not really that much. I do have quite a few pet peeves when it comes to this bike. It's really just one main thing that has been a constant pain in the butt to me, and would quite honestly outrules this bike for certain purposes. But nonetheless, we're going to talk about those things now, starting with the fasteners. Okay, the fasteners on this bike, they are not very high quality fasteners. I've done quite a few other, I've done quite a few maintenance videos, and although the bike is very easy to work on, it's quite difficult, or it's quite annoying rather, when, as you can see, kind of like right here, that's kind of almost rounded out. That's almost rounded out. I mean, there's lots of other different fasteners on the bike that are either almost rounded or just plain old rounded, because the quality of the metal that they use for the fasteners on this bike is very poor. So yeah, it's easy to work on, but it's quite unfortunate when you're trying to take it apart, because you're gonna have to take it apart. This thing, you're gonna be working on it a lot, so being able to take it apart and trying to take out certain fasteners, I mean, it would be really helpful if these fasteners were actually of a better quality, because you're going to be taking them in and out, on and off, quite often. So that's one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to this bike, is the fasteners. The second thing would be the documentation. There is a service manual for this bike, but there isn't any tutorial videos that are out there. I personally have made most of them, to be honest with you, and I've done the best that I could according to reading what the manual says and just learning how as I go along. But it's not too difficult, but that would also be something that it's not a major thing, but it's just something that you should be mindful of. And the reason why that's an issue is because when it comes to this bike, because it's a Chinese-made motorcycle and you buy it, you're not going to be able to take this bike, in most cases, you're not going to be able to take it to a mechanic to work on it. Okay? And the reason why is because most mechanics across the nation, any sensible mechanic shop, they generally want to put warranty on their work, right? Let's say, for example, you take your car in. You take your car in, they generally want to purchase replacement parts from the manufacturer, and with ordering those replacement parts, they can go ahead and guarantee and put a warranty on their labor, saying, hey, we've done the work, we've done it well, 60 days, 90 days, that's the warranty on their labor, right? If you have another problem within 60 or 90 days, you can come back, do whatever it is. With a bike like this, that's so unknown, and Chinese bikes really get a bad rap, nobody wants to touch this thing, and because again, where most mechanic shops, when they do work on their stuff, they got to put a warranty on their labor, and nobody wants to put warranty on labor when the bike itself has questionable reliability. So that's why it's so hard to get somebody to work on this bike. But what I will say is, all right, sorry about that. You might find the best luck with like mom and pop shops, you know, family owned businesses, small independent like workshops. They'll probably be the best bet with doing certain work that you just feel uncomfortable with, or troubleshooting things that may be outside of your scope. But in general, if you ask CSC, they'll be able to help you with potentially pinpointing certain things. But yeah, that's just something to be mindful of. Okay. Now, the number one main problem that I've been having with this bike up to this whole point, just reminding you guys, I've been using this bike in particular as a commuter bike, and my definition of a commuter bike, kind of like I was explaining before, it's to be a total and complete replacement for my pickup truck. And to me, if I was on average doing 12,000 miles or more in my pickup truck, I'd expect the same amount of mileage and also reliability out of the motorcycle to be able to go the same distance. Okay. And the issue that I've been dealing with up to this point with this bike has been valve recession. Okay. So, but again, this is coming from a person who is using this bike every single day, riding on average more than 1,000 miles a month. Up to this point, the only month that I have actually been able to just ride this bike without having any valve issues or any type of issues whatsoever, the only month that I was able to do that was the month of June. And in that month of June, I put 1,350 miles on the bike. Okay, so that was the only month that I was able to ride this bike without any type of interruptions. And so if you were to average that out over the span of 12 months, that would mean I would, if I was riding the bike the way that I wanted to, 12 months straight, I would have well over 16,000 miles on this bike in 1 year. If you go and watch my Should You Buy a CSC Motorcycle video, again, I know I mentioned this before, but I go in explicit detail about my expectations and what it is that I bought this bike for. And within that video, I also did like a cost breakdown, and I mentioned that my commute that I was doing with my truck over the span of a year, just my commute alone was over 14,400 miles. And then you add in all the commuting that I do with riding around town and, you know, other miscellaneous things, and that's about 15,600 miles or something like that of that nature. So that 16,000 mile estimate that I got from that 1 month that I was able to ride without interruption, that seems pretty accurate. So but yeah, I mean, valve recession, what's the deal? What's the problem with this bike? Well, we're gonna go into detail about the problem in a moment. We're gonna look at some sources. We're gonna look at some history about my experience thus far, and to pretty much show why it is that for someone who is wanting to use this bike as a commuter bike, again, my definition, 1,000 miles or more a month, this is not the bike for you. Okay. Okay, but let's go inside. We're going to look over some details. We're going to look over some information and show you guys what the real problem with this bike is.
All right, guys, so now we're going to talk about what is this big problem with the RX3. What is valve recession, and what is this valve recession issue? And I've come to discover that these valve recession issues that plagues these RX3 bikes, this is definitely not something that is new, and I'm definitely not the only person who has experienced these issues before. So if you do go to the China Riders forums, there is a very well-known moderator or avid poster for the RX3 bikes. There's many others that you can look at as well, but Spud Rider, because he's kind of revered and well known, he himself has also experienced the same issue with valve recession, albeit his bike actually went quite far between before he started experiencing valve recession issues. So for him, he was experiencing his intake valves becoming completely tight only after 1,000 miles from his last valve adjustment. And seeing this is the CSC RX3 maintenance manual or service manual, as you can see here. And in this service manual, as you can see here, it says here the maintenance schedule for the valve lash inspections initially should be at 500 miles and then every 5,000 miles thereafter. So if anything that comes before 5,000 miles is considered to be excessive or premature valve wear, okay, on this particular bike. And when it comes to my experience in particular, you can go back to some older videos, whether it be the reliability check update, CSC RX3 running like crap, a lot of different valve adjustment videos. I personally don't know exactly how it is that Spud was riding his bike. I'm not sure if he was a commuter, but for me, using my bike every single day for a considerable distance, he went 22,000 miles before he started experiencing his, or maybe even a little bit earlier than this. But I went about a little over 1,200 miles, so 1,200 miles, before I started experiencing valve recession on my bike. So really early on is when I started experiencing valve recession on my bike, extremely early on. And we'll look here in just a moment. Alright guys, so here is a look at my maintenance log for my RX3, and here on the right side is a legend that shows you what all these stars mean. And the majority of the actual maintenance that I've done on the bike has relatively been pretty easy stuff, like just upgrades, putting in new components, oil changes, minor maintenance. This is like cleaning the chain and lubricating certain things, oil changes, you name it. The red stars are the problems or the major maintenances is what we're going to be talking about. But the red stars that are coupled together with the pink ones, those ones are not an issue, because these are ones that are scheduled maintenances, such as the first valve adjustment at 500 miles, as you see down here. But over the whole span of my ownership experience so far, we've done quite a few red star maintenances, and altogether
in total, we've done 11 valve adjustments before even reaching 6,000 miles. And if we read the service manual, we're supposed to be doing valve adjustments every 500, as you see down here, 500 and every 5,000 miles. So basically, every valve adjustment that was needed to be done before reaching 5,000 miles was a premature valve adjustment. And the reason why I did those valve adjustments was because I was experiencing performance issues. So, and those performance issues are lack of power, poor MPG performance, rough idle, bike stalling, lots of different things, and which is the reason why I've had to adjust the valves at each one of these particular valve adjustments. And with all of these dates here, if you go to the CSC RX3 or even CSC motorcycle owners Facebook groups that I have within the description, you will be able to access, okay, all of these different posts. Every single post that is listed within my maintenance log with the corresponding dates directly correlate to a post that was done. Okay, so for example, if you want to know, let's say when I did my 2,500 mile service, May 30th, right? You go back to our maintenance log and we have, let's see, down here, all right here, May 30th, okay? Or May 29th, actually, 2,500 mile maintenance, okay? And that's also recorded here as well. So all the scheduled maintenances, the bigger maintenances, even the 5,000 mile maintenance, all those different kind of things, it's all recorded here. And again, if you want to know how the bike was maintained, how the bike was ridden, all that kind of stuff, there's posts within the Facebook groups, there's videos on my YouTube channel, and I would actually have to say that there is more information to be found within the Facebook group in itself, just because I was doing a little bit more posts within the Facebook group before I started to put things onto YouTube. But nonetheless, we're gonna go back now. All right. So when it comes to these valve adjustments that we've had to do, another note, I've had two different engines in my bike up to this point so far as well. If you would go to my YouTube channel or some of my older posts, you can see here about 3 months ago where I actually took the bike to CSC and they did the whole engine tear down to replace the head on my bike because I was experiencing those valve recession issues. Okay, and we're not going to watch the video because it's over 3 hours long, but I did take pictures of my old head and also the head of another person who was experiencing the same issue. Here on the China Rider forums, there is a person named Spud Rider who's very well known. There's others who have experienced this issue as well. They just haven't really documented it in the manner that Spud has done. So yeah, there's a lot of other folks who have been experiencing these valve recession issues. This is definitely, I am not the first person. This is an issue that has been going on for years. Okay, so it was definitely not CSC's first rodeo when I took my bike down there to have it quote unquote fixed. But some of these pictures I've taken and I have them here. So this is Spud's old head Okay, this is my old head. But we're first going to look at what a new head is supposed to look like. So this is what the new head that was put on my bike looked like. And as we zoom in here, you can see how the valves, this is one of the exhaust valves, how it's supposed to sit flush and kind of above this ring here. Okay, you guys can kind of see that. You guys can see how it's supposed to sit above, like this little lip is supposed to sit above this ring here. Same thing with the intake valves. The intake valves are bigger than the exhaust valves. Okay. They kind of sit above that ring. When we look at Spud's head, his was a lot more excessive wear than mine. His intake valves were quite sunken in. Okay, you can see that ring around is quite higher than his valves are, and his exhaust valves as well, sunken in a bit. Okay, same thing happened with my valves. Right, my intake valves are sunken in. You see the edges are above. All right, on the side here, they're above the valve itself, and same thing here. Right, and for the exhaust as well, it's sitting above and not flush with the valve in itself. Here's a look again at what a new head's supposed to look like. The valves are supposed to sit above the edges and not sunken in, as you guys can see here. And then we can also see this is when they took the valves out so that we can actually inspect the seats themselves. So the shiny part is where the valves actually contact, and you can see how this valve seat is kind of pushed in, and you see this, there's this pretty big rounded lip sort of here where it's caved in, okay, on each of the valves. And this is, again, we're going to go ahead and compare that to this here. This is a brand new, it's supposed to be flush, and this is what my old head looked like, along with that there. All this can be shown within the engine teardown video, or also with the other video that I did, what went wrong video, inconsistencies video. But pretty much the real problem here is that the material of what this head is made of is extremely soft. Okay, it just cannot withstand the pressure and the temperatures of consistent daily riding. Right, I don't know necessarily how other folks ride their bikes, but me riding my bike on a daily basis for a considerable distance has caused the head to be deformed in such a way. Right, here I have, just for those who don't know, I used to study environmental protection engineering while I was in college for a short period of time. Excuse the German. It was in Germany where I studied engineering, and so everything was in German. But a lot of the concepts that I understood from this, what they call Werkstoffkunde class, this is a class that studies building materials. So basically how all different types of building materials and other metals and that nature react to all different types of either extreme heat, cold, pressure, and other stresses. And what I believe is happening to the head within on the RX3 is that it's having this concept, which in German, sorry, again, is called elastisch-plastisch Wechselverformungen. Basically, every single element and every single material has a point, or has a certain I don't want to call it. It has this certain area where it can tolerate a certain amount of stress, and then it would bounce back, or it has the ability to bounce back. That's what we call elastic, kind of like a rubber band. Okay, but if you continue to stretch a rubber band over and over and over again, it's not going to always be able to bounce right back to its particular point. And this is where we start to get what we call elastisch-plastisch, where instead of being able to stretch back and forth, now it's moved over a bit, and now it's not as small and tight as it used to be. Now it's a little bit more sloppy. And especially when you put it in certain temperatures, or you put it in certain environments where it's under constant stress and constant high temperatures, doesn't have truly have an opportunity to fully cool down and settle, it just gets to a point where things continue to progress to where you have what you call irreversible, where you have irreversible deformities, basically. Now, I am unsure of what the head actually consists of. I'm assuming it's aluminum, which aluminum really has a really high elastisch point. I mean, it has to be like over 300 degrees before aluminum really moves. But I don't believe that the aluminum that the head is made out of is pure aluminum. Okay, it's most likely a very, very low quality alloy that they use for the head on the RX3, and it's the other impurities within that alloy that is causing the aluminum to react in such a way, because the impurities in there have a much lower, whatever those impurities might be, have a much lower tolerance for the pressure and the temperature that is built up within the engine over a constant period of time. So that is probably the main reason why it is that it sinks in so much is the impurities within that metal. And because there's literally no other manufacturer that I can ever think of in existence that has these type of problems with valve recession this early on. I mean, we're talking about 2,000 miles here. Okay, this engine only had 2,273 miles on it, and we have that much wear in comparison to a brand new head. And to the naked eye, it's not much. It's really not much of a difference. But when you're talking about measurements and going in there with a feeler gauge of like hundredths of a millimeter, and like we're talking about clearances between hundredths of a millimeter, like it doesn't take much to throw the performance of this engine completely off. Okay, and the amount of deformation that has occurred in just a little over 2,000 miles on this particular head. And even when we got a brand new head, let's go back to my engine statistics here. Even when we got the brand new head, I rode the brand new head, or with the brand new engine, pretty much. We did in total 3,506 miles up to this point. But the first incident where we had started to experience the valves wandering was at 1,646 miles, right? And then about 700 miles after that, we had to adjust them again, and then it's been subsequently every 300 miles. So with the bike being ridden every single day and being ridden to commute back and forth from work in a commuting setting, we basically got the exact same results. So it's the same thing as the first head, pretty much on repeat. So the head is the problem, right? The only difference between these two engines is that I've obviously been riding this one a little bit longer. I definitely also did the valve adjustments at a little bit of a wider gap. On the first engine, it was at 0.06 millimeters, and this one it was at 0.76, so almost 0.08 millimeters. Okay, so about double the gap gave me about double the durability, or double the clearance before I actually needed to adjust the valves. But as you can see here, the highway miles that was ridden is almost the same, around 200. The highway percentage is also lower just because it's just not as many miles, or it's just we have more miles on this engine, so about 5%, 6% is what's of the highway miles are ridden. So the vast majority, over 80% of what the bike with the new engine was ridden at, was 50 to 60 miles an hour, 60 miles a day, the commute route. And that all those commute videos can, if you would like to see exactly what my commute route has been like, you can see basically any of my experiment videos that I've gone over as well. So the reason why I also did these experiment videos is because I got a lot of questions or a lot of comments back within the ownership groups to say, hey, you know what, maybe it's your weight or the load. I've never seen any kind of research, neither have I seen any kind of any motorcycle ever in existence that has ever reacted this way with being slightly overloaded. So we went ahead and conducted the weight reduction experiment. That's this video here. And we went ahead and stripped the bike down completely. Like we stripped it down 100% down to almost nothing, you know? So we'll see here in a moment. Yeah. So this is what it looked like
windshield
for the WRE experiment.
I took off the chain.
If you want to see more, again, you can go to this video. You can see it more in depth about exactly how much weight we lost and overall what that whole experiment was about. But ultimately, just like common sense will pretty much tell you, no, the weight had played absolutely no role. Just because a bike has overweight, you know, just because the bike is overloaded by, at the time, 8 pounds, it was overloaded by 8 pounds maximum on the daily. It just depended on how much gas I had in the gas tank. Yeah, that played absolutely no role in the valve clearance durability. And at the time, I was also using lower gearing on the bike as well, so the bike actually had more torque than stock to pull the load. And with the results of the WRE also revealed is that even with the bike losing over 70 pounds, there was absolutely no change in MPG performance or speed either. So this bike went the exact same speed at the same RPMs, and I got the pretty much the exact same MPG, you know, at the beginning as I did when the bike was fully dressed. So it made no change at all. Then we did a stock gearing experiment where we put the stock front sprocket back on the bike, and we wanted to experiment to see whether or not lower RPM riding was going to help at all. And we also, within this video, go into explicit detail about a very common book that is quoted within either the China Rider forums and also within the Facebook ownership groups. This is the 5,000 miles at 8,000 RPM book. It's a very important book because with this book has basically been the foundation of what the valve clearance durability claim is based on. The main reason why we have in the service manual 5,000 mile valve clearance intervals for the RX3 is because of the results of that 5,000 miles at 8,000 RPM ride. So within this video, I go in depth and in detail where you can actually see for your own eyes exactly what the book says, you know, word for word, and we break it down. But the things that I've experienced with my bike and what that actual book says, and also the experience of literally every single other RX3 owner ever in existence who has ever ridden their bike on a consistent basis, no one has ever been able to replicate that performance that has been written within that book. So something just doesn't add up, and it just doesn't make sense. So anyway, we went ahead and did the stock gearing experiment, and the end results of the stock gearing experiment were sadly that it made absolutely no difference. So the problem with the RX3 is indeed the material or the alloy that makes up the head where the valves sit in and slam up against. Okay, that is the issue. All right. And we have determined that getting a new head, I mean, you can, especially that's would be the appropriate fix. You can get a new head, but it's only going to be a matter of time before you're right back at square one with valve recession issues. And when it comes to my experience of riding this bike over 1,000 miles a month, mine was able to last a little over 1,600 miles before, you know, we were right back at square one with valve recession issues. Okay, but yeah, so there's the issue, there's the problem, and I hope you guys have a much better understanding about what the problem actually is, and we'll talk about some potential solutions, which ultimately, if you're looking to buy this bike as a commuter bike, buy something else. Okay, do not buy this bike to use it as a commuter bike. All right, here guys, I wanted to show you guys this one post real quick that I found within the Kawasaki KLR 650 owners group that was not too long ago. A certain user was asking, based on your experience, how often do you guys adjust the valves? And a lot of other owners have commented how often they check or adjust their valves and at what intervals. One person here stated they check them once a year. No real definitive information there. This person has a 2009 model. They check them every 13,500 miles, and he plans to check them again at 30,000. So there's when it comes to these quotes here, there's a big difference between checking and actually adjusting valves. Okay, when it comes to the industry standard. So when folks are saying that they're checking, that just means they're taking the head off or taking the valve covers off. They're going in there with their feeler gauge and they're just inspecting, right? It's just an inspection. So this person inspected at 13,000 miles. Here's a guideline that is posted by a person named Wattman, where, well, he has almost 200,000 miles on his KLR, and he does valve adjustments. I believe it was quoted here. One moment. Here we go, valve checks and adjustments. So 1,000, 16, 44, 74, 92. Okay. So, don't know exactly when he actually did adjustments, but these are, at least these are when the checks were made. And you can see the gaps are quite large. I mean, 30,000 miles in between. Here, 50,000 miles in between. So again, I just wanted to give you guys kind of like a different perspective on how other bikes are actually, you know, handle these whole valve adjustment and valve checked in comparison to the RX3. Here's some more where they say that they check them. Again, not adjust, but just check 10 to 15. This person here, this person here, he rode his bike 42,000 miles before actually doing an adjustment. So here we have a definitive answer about adjustments. So 42,000 miles before actually making an adjustment. Then he did a 685 kit. That's a very common upgrade when it comes to these KLRs. And then he did his second valve adjustment at 92,000 miles. So he went 50,000 miles between adjustments, and he's still using the original head. Okay. So you can see the vast difference between a Japanese-made high-quality alloy or high-quality aluminum. I'm not completely sure what they use for their head. I'm assuming it's aluminum. High-quality, pure aluminum versus this RX3 cheap impurities that, you know, is having to need adjustments basically every 180 or 300 miles, 1600 miles, right? Like even if the bike truly did go 5,000 miles before actually needing an adjustment, you can see in comparison to the competition, this is not impressive. This is not impressive when it comes to the industry standard. Okay, but the realistic experience, especially if the bike is ridden every single day, this is what you can expect. You can expect to see valve adjustments every 300 miles or every 800 miles. It just depends on what you define commuting as. A lot of these folks in here also ride their bikes every single day. They go way farther distances than I go. I've seen folks say that they have 140 mile commutes or over 100 mile commutes every single day, riding on a highway, things of that nature. So it's all about the quality of materials, quality construction, and not just about RPMs. I mean, if a bike is specifically designed to withstand the pressure and the temperatures, it should not react in such a drastic way when being used consistently. Here is a web page about a motorcycle of which I would compare the engine design of this particular motorcycle, I would actually compare the Honda CB250R really to be more in comparison, okay, to this. Yeah, so, but it's pretty much the same thing. So the Honda CB250R, it's a 250cc single cylinder sport bike engine, as you see here, single cylinder 240cc. So the RX3 also is a single cylinder, like the engine comes from a sport bike. You can read it on the CSC website. It comes from the RC3 racing MotoGP bike. So they're supposed to be specifically designed to be able to withstand high RPMs for an extended period of time. This Japanese made Honda 250, same displacement. I mean, we don't have to look at the KLRs, we can just look at the Honda CBR, and we can see here that the valve clearance inspection interval is 16,000 miles. Okay, just like I was saying before. Same thing with the 300. It really hasn't changed anything. The 300 is just a little bit bigger. I guess they went away with the 250 cc's, but same thing here. We have 16,000 miles before needing to do a valve clearance inspection. And if you go into forums and ownership forums with folks who own these bikes, it's the same story with just like with the KLR owners group. Folks don't do valve adjustments or don't really need to do anything at 16,000 miles. They generally go well beyond that, possibly even up to 30,000 miles before adjustments are needed. Okay, so again, I just wanted to, well, this is a more accurate comparison to the actual RX3 engine, and I just wanted to give you guys a comparison to what the actual industry standard is like, so that way you can have this comparison of you know, the reliability and performance of the RX3 versus, well, literally any other single cylinder motorcycle in existence of a reputable manufacturer.
All right, so now that we have dug deep into what the actual problem is and the whole saga and series that has gone on with this, my whole experience thus far, I want to kind of talk to you guys out there who potentially already own this bike, right? Like, say it's too late, you know, you're somebody who bought this bike, maybe even used, wanting to use it as a commuter bike like I'm doing, okay? Maybe your bike is running fine now, but later down the line, not so well. Maybe you're starting to develop valve recession issues, or maybe you have that issue already. And again, your bike is out of warranty. You know, you could spend, well, God knows how much money. I have to look it up to get a brand new head, right? But if you continue to ride the bike in that manner as a commuter bike, and again, that's 1,000 miles a month or more, you're gonna, I mean, sooner or later, you're gonna be right back at square one with valve recession issues. It's inevitable, okay? So what do? Well, so far, this is what I've been experimenting with, okay? For the past 130 miles, what I've done with my bike, this is not definitive yet, but this is just something I've been experimenting with. Instead of adjusting your valves to the expected clearance of like 0.08, you can try to make it a little bit even bigger, okay? So what does that do? What that does is it increases the gap even further to hopefully give you a little bit more time in between valve adjustments. But there's going to be two main side effects that's going to occur due to making the gap that wide. Number one, your engine's going to start, or the valves are going to clack quite loudly. Okay, once the bike actually warms up, it's not going to be so bad, but the valves, they do clack pretty loud. Okay, and the second issue that you're going to experience is stalling, potentially. Okay, you can experience some potential stalling. There is two remedies to that that I've done and that I've experimented with. One, you can adjust your throttle, so that way the bike's throttle is a little bit more responsive, because the stalling generally happens when you come to a stop and you're in first gear, or you're already at a stop and you're trying to leave in first gear. So you can adjust your throttle so that it's a bit more responsive. Just be careful of swinging your bars too far, because sometimes when you swing your bars too far, the throttle starts to actuate. But that's one thing that you can do. And another thing that you can do, or a technique that you can use, especially when you're coming to a dead stop or leaving from a dead stop, blip the throttle. Okay, that just keeps your RPMs up, so that way the bike just doesn't stall. Okay, and the reason why the bike is stalling is because when the valves, or when the gap spaces are a little bit too big, the valves themselves, they don't open fully. Like, they're not opening fully, which means that the gases that escape, and also the air that's coming in, it's not as much air, right? Like, when the spaces are too small, that means that the valves are opening too much, and it's very dangerous because it doesn't close all the way either, right? And yeah, so when that happens, that's when you can get the burnt valve condition. So too small is definitely not something you want. Too large, maybe just a little bit too large, it's a little bit of power loss. Yeah, the bike is technically running a little bit leaner, but the main thing that you're avoiding is the valves not closing all the way. That's the main thing that we want to avoid, right? So I'm experimenting with this for a little bit, opening it a little bit wider than usual. Hopefully that also reduces the distance just a tad bit of the valve moving and pounding up against the seat, so maybe there's not going to be as much wear, but also it just hopefully will extend those valve clearance intervals even further than what you've probably been experiencing. So far with myself, I've had to basically give the valves attention every 300 or so miles. But with this experiment, I've only ridden 130 miles so far, and so we'll see how far I can go. But yeah, ultimately the proper fix is to get a new head. We know this, but especially for us who are using this bike as a commuter bike, we know that that's not the proper fix, because we're just going to be right back at square one. So this is really just applying to you guys who, again, you bought this bike to get you back and forth from work, back and forth from school. You're depending on this thing. That's just a little workaround that can hopefully get you back and forth from where you need to go, help you pay your bills, help you keep money in your pocket, and hopefully you can save up to ultimately buy a new machine that's going to actually be better, that can actually be more capable for the job. And so that's pretty much the boat that I'm in and where I'm at when it comes to this. My bike, it's still under warranty, and it's still technically could potentially get fixed. I just know with the way that I will be using the bike and am using the bike, it's kind of a waste of time. It's a waste of money, waste of time to take it wherever it is and needs to be taken and put a new head on there. It's just, again, it's just a waste of money, waste of time. So I'm pretty much just doing my best to keep this bike functional so that way I can use it for what I need to use it for, get the most of my money out of it, so that way I can save up enough money hopefully to move on to something else. And so that's just a little bit of knowledge that I wanted to share. And ultimately, I guess the conclusion, well, now long-term review, I'm pretty sure you guys have seen other reviews out there, what this bike's adventure capabilities are, what this bike's off-road capabilities are, and now you're seeing a review of what its commuter capabilities are. And is the RX3 CSC RX3 to be taken seriously as a commuter bike? My answer is absolutely not. This bike is meant to have fun with, not to be depended on. So then that leaves the question, who is the RX3 for? What is the RX3 for? My simple answer to that, or my opinion, would be the RX3 is for someone who has 3, 4, 5 different motorcycles, right? This is not your first bike. This is not, even your second bike. This is motorcycling is a hobby to you. You don't want to ride your pride and joy. You don't want to put your, too many miles on your other bikes. This is a bike that you keep in rotation. You go on short little trips every once in a while. Maybe you're somebody who's just tired of picking up your 600-pound GS, and so instead of taking your 600-pound GS or your 500-pound Africa Twin or KLR, whatever, on the trails, or you want to take something much lighter, you do it once a month, twice a month. I mean, that's who this bike is for. This is for someone who is a hobbyist. Okay, you're not going to put very much miles on the bike. You're not going to use it very often. You're definitely not depending on it. And when it breaks, you have other motorcycles to ride, basically. That's what this motorcycle is for, because it's not reliable at all, at least to the extent to be depended on. It's reliable enough to have fun with, not reliable enough to, be a serious commuter motorcycle. So that's pretty much my review of the CSC RX3. I'm gonna continue to ride this bike as much as I can. I'll potentially give some more updates later on. I do have some ideas to use this bike for certain things. I was thinking about potentially even using this bike to do some food deliveries, like Grubhub or Uber Eats or DoorDash, something like that. Like, make this bike useful in some manner, ride it a couple of days out of the week, try to make some money. Riding 60 miles a day back and forth from work every single day, it's probably a little bit too much, but maybe riding a couple hours every other day, from door to door, doing some food deliveries, that'll probably help me save up some more money. Because ultimately, the bike that I would like to buy, the one that I have my eye on heavily, would be the KLR 650. Yeah, that bike is a tried and true platform, tried and true motorcycle, unkillable, and should have absolutely no problem doing exactly what it is that I've been doing with this bike day in and day out. Alright, so that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, or if you are curious about how this motorcycle is maintained, how it was ridden, how I was commuting with it. Maybe even want to look at some of those experiments that I was doing and other miscellaneous things. Check out my channel. I've literally have documented my entire experience with this bike up to this point. There are dozens of videos for you to look at and to choose from, for you to explore and see what this bike is all about and what my experience up to this point has been all about. So go ahead and do that. But until next time, guys, yeah, stay safe out there, and peace.